What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 71, and I'm the co host, Kyle Anslone. Co host Will Porter returns to the show. Will, how's it going today?
What's up, Kyle? How you doing, man?
Doing pretty good. I want to remind people how they could support the show here. You could share the show from YouTube, Library, or Odyssey. That's where you find the video version of the show. The audio, video, show notes, everything together is hosted at the Libertarian Institute, where you could also find my news roundup. And then you could support the show financially, either by donating like cryptos, Bitcoin Cash. Those links are at in the show notes pages anywhere you listen to the show. And then you could also support Patreon or Subscribestar, and both of those links are in the show notes page as well. The last thing you could do is support the show, and this way you can help yourself a little bit too, is check out PalomaVerdeStore.com. That's where they sell great CBD products, lab tested results, so you know you're getting quality products like you would with any vitamin. You know how it's going to hit you every time and how it's going to help you. I personally really been enjoying the Slav stick they sent me. Yesterday I had a little bit of back pain, rubbed it on, and it really, talk about inflammation, that burning feeling a little bit, it really takes it away. So I recommend that. I know right now they have a big sale on their extract with melatonin, buy one, get one free. Well, I think in the past on the show you've mentioned that you found that to be helpful with insomnia and stuff like that. So a
Yeah,
little
that's
bit
my
of
favorite
pain.
one.
Yeah, a little bit of pain. Got some insomnia going on. Things that they can help you with at PalomaVerdeStore.com. Be sure to use the promo code PEACE, PEACE, for 25% off at checkout. All the links, everyone, are in the show notes page for everything. So you could go there to get your CBD, donate to the show, share the show, whatever you want to do. All right, well, let's start talking about the Biden administration. Really been trying to tackle on the show how the Biden administration is setting up foreign policy. In some things like Yemen, we've gotten details, but not enough, so we're kind of still forming. On something like Syria, we've really gotten nothing. It just seems like the same things happening from before. I talked about that a little bit on the last show. What's going on with Assange, Will? That's something that really hasn't gotten any press coverage. I noticed it was interesting, and something that's kind of telling about press freedom is that in the final days of the Trump administration, everybody was pressing Trump to pardon Assange, and
Yeah.
depending on what reporting you believe from inside the White House, he was somewhat close to not very close to going through with that. But nobody thought January 21st, 2021, that's when the war against press freedom ends. Joe Biden comes in and he lets Assange out of jail because there wasn't even expectation that Joe Biden was going to pardon Assange. We thought everybody was hoping to get done under Trump because it's not going to happen here. And so what's going on with Biden's Assange policy? I see we got this article here from Shadowproof, I'm guessing by Kevin Gunstola.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he did a good one on this. Yeah, honestly, like I didn't like, you're correct that like I had no expectation that Biden would just pardon Assange or anything on day one. But I honestly was not sure what they intended to do about this. I hadn't seen much signaling on the campaign trail about this. I don't know if they even devoted much commentary to it. Assange tends to be a pretty like pariah-like figure, especially among like establishment Democrats. So I guess it kind of makes sense why he didn't mention it much. But it does seem like it'd be a great way for him to demonstrate his whole shtick about how America is back and, bring back press freedoms and show how he's the polar opposite from mean old Donald Trump, who's the, dictator and all this kind of stuff that, he's been pushing. But unfortunately, we do have reports this week that Biden's Justice Department is going to continue pushing for Assange's extradition from the UK. And presumably that does mean that they have no intention of dropping the 17 counts under the Espionage Act that Trump hit Assange with in 2019, or the computer intrusion charge. I think is a separate one. However, the DOJ spokesperson didn't directly say that when he announced it earlier this week. He just said they will be appealing Judge Vanessa Baraitser's ruling against extradition last month, where she like rejected on the grounds of Assange's mental health and said that there's some concern that he might commit suicide in custody. However, the judge did not she basically accepted the rest of the American argument that like Assange isn't a journalist, that he has no journalistic or public interest in publishing classified material. So the U.S. in its appeal, I think, just needs to challenge the part about his mental state, as far as I understand it. And they actually submitted that appeal on Friday. Then that's something that the DOJ did confirm. However, like another reason why this is even more unfortunate is that like Biden has a template he could follow here. Like his own former boss, Barack Obama, His DOJ's position on all this was that what Assange and WikiLeaks does is not distinguishable from what journalists do regularly, including at like the Times and the Post and other mainstream outlets. And so therefore they had declined to bring charges against Assange on that basis. That I think it was like the New York Times defense or something they called it. But apparently Biden is just throwing that formula out, and like his people are now they're of a different mind on that, and they will be picking up where Trump left off. At least that's what it appears. And there has been a lot of pressure, like you mentioned, the pressure on Trump to pardon Assange.
Well, can I jump in with
ahead.
something there, because I think there's
Of course.
another important point, which was under the in the first extradition hearing, one of the main points that Assange's lawyers made was that it was political, that no new information had surfaced between the time when it was the Obama administration to the Trump administration. The Obama administration had identified the, what they call it, the New York Times problem, which is you can't prosecute WikiLeaks for something that you also couldn't prosecute the New York Times for, right? And so
Right.
I would think that that if Biden continues with this, then any further appeal by the Assange team, so let's say they decide that it actually is safe to extradite him to a U.S. prison where they're going to torture him and everything, I would think there's going to be a problem now with them being able to make the argument that it's political, because Biden's the anti-Trump, according to the establishment and everything.
Yeah, I could certainly see them running with that argument. It sort of takes away one of the potential arrows from their argument,
Right.
from their quiver. Um, but yeah, I just like, it's interesting to see how some of the pressure on Trump, like you mentioned how there people are they were demanding that Trump pardon Assange, and like some of that has carried over to Biden. You had like last week all these civil liberties groups, I think like 30 of them, like the Freedom of the Press Foundation, the ACLU, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, all these big well-known groups publishing a letter, like basically begging the Biden administration to drop the charges on Assange and let him go free. But just like a day or two later, that's when we got this announcement from Biden's DOJ that they will not be doing that. They're going to be pressing on with what Trump started, basically. So that is a bummer, I think. Like this is an area I think where Biden could have very easily made it clear that like his policy night and day from Trump's, but he's choosing to kind of stay the course that he set rather than the one like the formula or like the framework laid out by his old boss. Um, you think it would be pretty easy for him to return to that and to sell that. Everyone's always talking about how much they miss Obama and all this stuff, but on that one, I guess like they want to keep what Trump has started. So that's kind of a bummer.
Right, and the politics from the Democratic Party towards WikiLeaks has really changed in the past 12 years or so, Will, with, WikiLeaks releasing Hillary Clinton's email and giving us all that very important information.
That's right.
But that's something else that I guess works against Assange here, is that maybe the Assange legal team can now argue that it's political, that the Democrat Party has an axe to grind against WikiLeaks or something like that,
Yeah.
since they released the information that in a way cost Hillary Clinton the election. I mean, really, it was her own corruption that was proven from the WikiLeaks documents, but that's not how they see it. You
Right.
know what I mean? So I don't think Biden's Attorney General Merrick Garland is the nominee, has been confirmed yet. So I guess things could change, and we could keep an eye on his confirmation hearing to see if he gets asked any questions about Assange. But I'm guessing that's not going to be at the top of the issues for the Attorney General. I'm guessing most people will be asking, what are you going to do to make the FBI more effective and arrest more people?
Right. And track down Russian spies better.
Will, anything else on Assange that that we should be paying attention to here? I guess this story could pretty easily get lost, and another 6 months could go by with Assange being in these terrible solitary confinement like conditions, with being in somewhat poor health, and in a prison where COVID could run rampant, and even if it's got a pretty high survival rate, I don't like my chances if I'm stuck inside all day. He's probably getting no vitamin D and all that
Yeah.
other good stuff to fight COVID. So he could be somebody really susceptible to being taken down by it. So I mean, is there any like big things going on, or are we just kind of hoping that one day Biden changes his mind on this?
Well, I would urge people to keep an eye on his appeal, like or excuse me, the U.S. government's appeal in his extradition case, because that is sort of like the next step that we're facing now. They did submit that appeal. The U.S. side did on Friday, I believe. I haven't seen really any details to come out of that yet, though. There might be some stuff out, but that is what I think tell people to keep an eye on for now, at least.
All right. Well, we got bad news on Assange and potentially bad news, I guess, on China here. I have a story, I think, from a Chinese or from Bloomberg, actually. Biden says Pentagon task force will review U.S. China strategy. So I guess we really weren't expecting a great policy on China from Biden. He was pretty hawkish during the debates and stuff like that. But Will, what's this China task force looking to do?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't super detailed about this. He announced it earlier this week. He said they're going to look at strategy, operational concepts, technology, and force posture, which is all obviously pretty vague and can mean a whole lot of things. So it's not totally clear what's going to result from this. But he did say we're going to do some kind of sweeping review at the Pentagon of U.S. China policy. And he presented it in a fairly hawkish light. He was saying how this is gonna allow us to meet the China challenge, and how America must win the competition of the future, and all this kind of boilerplate stuff. But everything that very much puts the U.S. in an antagonistic position toward China. And this is all, of course, after Biden has repeatedly called China like our greatest competitor. And I think just last week he was saying how we don't want conflict with China, we just want extreme competition, which like I don't know. That sounds like that could possibly lead to conflict, depending on how extreme you're talking about here with your competition. And this task force, unfortunately, does appear like he's going to be staffing it with hawks. He picked this guy, Ely Ratner, to lead it. There's going to be 15 civilian and uniformed people, but led by this Ratner guy. And he, as the great Dave DeCamp pointed out the other day at antiwar.com, this guy just wrote an op-ed back in September where he was attacking Trump for being weak on China. So I think that itself says something, just given that Trump's policies were not that weak. That's been sort of a pattern we've seen with Biden too. Like in his first foreign policy address, that was what he was like kind of setting up with Russia. That Trump was just rolling over and being weak on Russia. So that sets the bar to where he has to be even more hawkish than that. So that's unfortunate. This Ratner guy also, he was a senior figure at CNAS, the Center for New American Security, which is like the liberal hawk version of the hardline neocon Project for a New American Century, or PNAC. He was a China studies guy at the Council on Foreign Relations. He's worked at the RAND Corp. And at some point, I think he was a Senate staffer for Biden. So that is the guy that they have running this thing to review U.S. China policy. And he's got all just like the exact credentials you would expect for, I don't know, everything that tells me that he's not going to have good influence on U.S. China policy.
Yeah, and I actually have another quote for him on China. This is from the Spotlight article today at antiwar.com by Connor Freeman. It's up at the Libertarian Institute if anybody's interested in reading the whole article about how Biden's drawing America into great power competition. But Ratner said in a CNAS report that the U.S. must counter China with combat credible posture in the Indo-Pacific. And that's a pretty crazy thing to imagine, Will, that we need to have enough combat power in the Indo-Pacific to counter China because their missiles are so effective against our ships and stuff like that. How many they think we actually, and how many military resources that they think we're going to need in the region to combat China is probably off the charts, and is making the military industrial complex very happy when they're looking at their bottom line and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely, and we may already kind of starting to see that sort of posture. Biden's done a whole lot of rearranging in his first few weeks here in office. He signed like 30 executive orders undoing things that Trump has done. However, something he's not reversed, something he's continued on the exact same course, is U.S. military policy toward China. I think you had some stuff on this as well, but like in just the last week or two, we've done drills with two carrier strike groups in the South China Sea. We're talking like two aircraft carriers, a handful of destroyers and cruisers. That's a lot of firepower to be throwing around so far away from home. It does sound pretty consistent with what Ratner's talking about there, with like a combat-ready posture, having all this firepower out there. And we've talked a lot about Trump, doing the same kind of things. He did all kinds of exercises and freedom of navigation missions right there on China's doorstep. People might even recall the time that they were caught flying surveillance planes over like a live fire Chinese naval drill with Chinese aircraft carriers. So like very dangerous and stupid stuff that they were doing under Trump. But now with Biden, we have the carrier strike groups on Tuesday. And then they were also earlier this month they sailed a guided missile destroyer, the USS John McCain, through the Taiwan Strait, and then sent it on next to the Paracel Islands, which is like a disputed territory that China claims. I think Taiwan and Vietnam also claim it, and I think we back Taiwan on that. But basically, we'll back anyone who's opposing a Chinese territorial claim. Like in January, Biden also backed up I think he told the Japanese Prime Minister that he backs their claim to the Senkaku Islands as well. That's another disputed territory. So he's carrying on a lot of the same stuff from Trump. So basically, with this task force that he's embarked on here, it's really not clear at all what Biden's going to be changing about Trump's policies. It sounds like a lot of the same stuff he's carrying on. And given the guy he has running this task force, given that Ratner thinks that Trump was weak on this issue, it seems like the only direction they could go is sort of more hawkish and more bellicose in terms of the U.S. posture toward China. It seems like that's where things are headed.
Yeah, I think there's a couple really important things, and it's really important that you point out that Ratner's leading this. We just saw Will with was it Afghan Strategy Group or Study Group, the report that they released that said we need to keep U.S. troops in Afghanistan. It was put together by a congressional commission. Well, they say that we need to stay, but if you go and you look at who contributed to the report, it's not whistleblowers like, an Afghan veterans who were on the ground and who have unique perspective and study the conflict, like Matthew Ho or a Daniel Davis or somebody like Scott Spalding, who is a previous guest on this show and has seen quite a lot of Afghanistan, but rather it's General Dunford, who's a big hawk on it, and former New Hampshire senator, I was living there at the time and hated this woman with a passion, Kelly Ayotte or Ayotte, was also ahead on this group, and she was a total hawk, in line with McCain, Graham, and Lieberman at the time. She was fitting in with them. And so when you put hawks ahead of your strategy sessions, it's not surprising that they're going to come up with reports that say, we need all these other resources in the area. Something I noticed from, I think it was your write-up at RT, Will, that this was in a heavily trafficked area. And if anybody's watching the YouTube video now, or if you want to check out Dave DeCamp's article at this at antiwar.com, you can see a little map of, the area we're talking about here and all the conflicting claims, but it's also a highly trafficked area, a lot of ships moving through. And in the past, what was that, like 2017, Will, when we had U.S. ships in this area running into other ships, sailors dying, innocent civilians dying, and all this? These aren't risk-free maneuvers. And then the other issue is at best, these ships are kind of like U.S. troops in Poland or in the Middle East, should war come, head to head with Iran, where they're essentially tripwires. These aircraft carriers, even two U.S. aircraft carrier groups, which I know there's a whole lot of Americans who will thump their chest and think that those two carrier groups could take on any challenge. But with the technology that China has, I don't think that's the case, and that, those ships are really just targets, and, they're going to lead to a larger conflict, and who knows what would happen, what the American reaction would be if we lost two carrier groups in the South China Sea. But of course, the pointlessness of all of this we could get into, Will. But I don't know, anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of underscore, that's a point I make, as much as possible, that like these sort of like, forward deployments, these show of force missions, these freedom of navigation missions, protecting the sea lanes, as they say, these things don't come without a cost. Like you said, there's all kinds of tripwires they set up that could lead to disaster just on accident. Like, there's a lot of deliberate things that U.S. policy does that, are contemptible and worth criticism, but like just stumbling into a war on accident through some kind of just like mistake at the high seas, that would just be a damn shame.
Right. I did notice that Biden and President Xi of China were either scheduled to talk or did have their first talk now. Do we know any details about what Biden wants to talk to Xi about, or what was on that conversation? I know you mentioned that, and a lot of what Biden is saying, that we want to be more competitive with China, but that's, it sounds like capitalism, but it's really trade war and mercantilism. So I don't know if you had anything on this one.
Yeah, I didn't actually. I saw that he had maybe had the call. I think they said. I thought I saw that they were scheduled for a long call, but I didn't actually see what they had discussed. I know Blinken. I saw some details out of the Secretary of State's first call with his Chinese counterpart, and I know that on that call he was very hawkish. He said we're going to hold China accountable for all its abuses and challenge it on the world stage and defend U.S. interests and all this stuff. So I'm not sure if Biden's call was exactly that hawkish or contentious, but I expect there's a lot of the same kind of themes there. And, I mean, we've also seen things. I think you may have discussed this on a previous show recently. That China does still plan on embarking on the whole Quad alliance that Trump sort of started reviving the alliance between the U.S., India, Japan, and Australia down there in the Asia Pacific. It's supposed to be like the Asian NATO, and Biden apparently is continuing those kind of meetings and that whole that alliance.
Yeah, I saw that. I think they're calling for the first Quad summit to happen pretty soon, and they keep using phrases and terms like mini NATO. That's pretty scary to think that they're actually going to try to form like a actual NATO alliance to counter China here, especially because it's going to provoke China to want to militarize more as well. And it's not just those four nations, although those are the biggest ones that are always brought up. Biden
Yeah.
is going to discuss in the Philippines a deal to keep U.S. troops there. Extend the visiting forces agreement. There's a pretty, I guess, uncomfortable relationship between the U.S. and Philippines occupying that, and that being pretty brutal and nasty. So this
Yeah.
is not exactly a good sign. And then also this, the whole Modi government in India is pretty nasty. And Biden had his first call with him, and one of the things he really focused on there was being aggressive towards China. And I think I had a statement from Biden here that said the U.S. will not hesitate to use force when necessary to protect allies.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
India having these border disputes and stuff with China, could it matter less to any American who owns the peaks in the Himalaya mountains and, what mountaintop is where and all this stuff? But yet there's so much focus on that from, these governments that it's awfully scary that we're getting this entangled with India when it has this many issues, and then of course like the Philippines, where with its border disputes with China as well.
Yeah, and then the Japanese too, their own territorial disputes. We are butting our way into all these things that we should have really no business being in, and it's a lot of the same stuff that Trump did too. So it's very pretty much carrying on. Like in terms of U.S.-China policy, it doesn't seem like we're set for that much difference here under Biden.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, China's another good mention there because he's been so committed towards, I think he's mentioned twice that we're going to defend the Senkaku Islands, these empty rots off the coast of Taiwan. Why,
Yeah.
again, they matter to me or you will, I don't know. But we have to care about them and know about them because it could be a potential tripwire between a major war between the U.S. and China. And if nothing else, it's going to be the cause for them to spend tons and tons of our tax dollars on more warships and stuff we don't need. So,
Yeah, that's right.
all right. Anything else on China? Any stories that I missed? I know we have just a ton of China stuff.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff. There's been a lot, even Biden's taken office, but I think we hit all the bases. I guess maybe one last thing to say is that the arms sales to Taiwan, I believe those are continuing too. Things under Trump that were started. Biden's frozen some of the Trump arms deals, but doesn't appear that the ones to Taiwan are going to be interfered with at all.
All right. Well, you wrote up this great story on Gitmo. So, is it gonna close? What's gonna happen? I know, his boss Obama was supposed to close it, and now we're 12 years later.
Yeah, yeah. So on Friday, we got some statements from the Biden administration to the effect that they would like to close down the Guantanamo Bay prison over in Cuba there, where we supposedly keep all the most evil and dangerous terrorism suspects. So first, we had Biden's National Security Council spokesperson, Emily Horn. She came out and told Reuters first that the NSC will do an assessment of the prison with the broader goal of closing it. It seems like in the first few weeks of Biden here, we've had just nonstop reviews and assessments and stuff. It's just like a flurry of them. However, later on Friday, we also had the White House spokes, Jen Psaki, coming out and saying much the same, that there would be some kind of interagency review to see about closing it down for good. Unfortunately, though, she did not give any kind of specific time frame at all. It sounds kind of like they're just talking about doing this eventually at some point, before Biden leaves office. So they're not committing themselves to anything too specific here yet. Um, but nonetheless, like I am glad, I'm glad to hear them even talking about doing it at all. Like, however, as you mentioned, we should remember that we heard exactly the same thing from the last Democrat in office, from Barack Obama. He vowed to do the very same thing. And as I kind of get into in my story, Obama promised up and down to shut down Guantanamo for years. In fact, like he promised to do it on the campaign trail back in 2007, as early as then, maybe even before then, while he was still a senator. And then it looked like he would kind of do it as soon as he took office. Like on the second day of his presidency, I think he passed an executive order to close down the prison within a year. I think he also ordered the same day to shut down the CIA, like black site secret torture dungeon network. So it did seem like he was going to follow through on some of the stuff that he was talking about on the campaign trail. However, by 2011, jump to then, the prison's still open, and everything had kind of started to stall out. Like you had all this resistance from Republicans in Congress, and also from Obama's own Pentagon and Department of Justice, which I think this stuff is like it's illustrative to look and see what happened under Obama, just to see what can happen. Because you had a lot of resistance from people in the DOJ and Pentagon who didn't want to give away or take away the government's torture and detention powers. Like sort of once they get these authorities, they never want to give them up. And so I think that's important to remember when we're seeing Biden try to do this. We had like in 2011 as well, we had the National Defense Authorization Bill of that year that Obama signed, of course, that basically killed the moves to close Guantanamo. Like I think that barred the government from using certain funds to transfer prisoners. There were people, I think, who argued that Obama had the authority to do it on his own as commander in chief. But nonetheless, that whole thing just stalled out. I think Obama did transfer out like 200 prisoners or so. Like there were 250 when he took power, I think, and there were like 41 when he left office. So that's good. But it is very frustrating just to see him say over and over again over the years that he wants to close this thing and make this happen. He's saying it on day 2 of his presidency. And then, 12 years later, it still hasn't happened. We've been through a whole other administration now. And now Biden is going to, I guess, take a crack at it.
Right. And, one of the most incredible parts of all of this, Will, is during the investigation into what happened with the torture program, which involves Guantanamo Bay and all that, the Senate, the head of the Senate, committee, the Intelligence Committee, Dianne Feinstein, at the time a very prominent Democrat, was spied on by the CIA, and that you would think that would have like given Obama some political capital to be, stick a finger in the eye of the CIA, like you spied on my Democrat senator, now I'm gonna, but there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of actual real, want for reform here. In fact, they're still in it knowing innocent people. They know people who are only in Guantanamo Bay because of mistaken identity are still sitting there to this day. And so I know, Will, everybody on the right is going to go, oh my God, you're letting the terrorists out, or you wanted them in a prison in America. What if they, I don't know, escape from the supermax prison and go and blow themselves up somewhere? And that's kind of the reaction you get. But at the same time, I think people fail to realize how, many more people could be radicalized, to want to harm Americans by keeping the prison open, especially when you have innocent people there, rather than, them just having such a narrow-minded thing to think, oh, this one bad guy that's been in Gitmo for 16 years who's been tortured. Some of these people apparently can't even sit down because they've been like force-fed so many times and been tortured in so many ways. And some of them deserve, to have terrible, miserable lives and all that stuff. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if a guy can't sit down, he's probably not a threat to break out of a maximum security prison.
Yeah, no kidding. And I mean, like you're saying, there's all these like considerations of how it could radicalize people keeping this torture prison open. But then it's also just a matter of like the rule of law, man. Do we have a constitution? Do we have a limited republic or not? Or are we a blood-soaked empire? We're supposed to have due process here. We've had like over 700 people in this prison in total, not all at the same time. But like a ton of those guys have had no due process. They weren't charged. They were held indefinitely. Like this is like Obama's right when he said this is a stain on our record. This is like a real a dark chapter of our history that I think even conservatives, even tough guy conservatives, should be able to see. Like this is betraying our principles as a nation or whatever, the stuff that they claim to care about. We've had all kinds of like, it's not only the torture, but if you read if you read the other Scott Horton, the human rights lawyer in Harper's, back when this was happening years ago, there was like a string of mysterious suicides that seemed like probably they were murder. There's a lot of really terrible, dark stuff that like even worse than torture. If you can get worse than torture, you can find it at Guantanamo. So, there's every reason to shut this thing down. There's really no good reason to keep it open. We have all kinds of, like you're saying, maximum security prisons in the United States that I think, if we have a genuine, legit terrorism suspect, and there are some at Guantanamo, I think our legal system and our prison system can deal with them. We don't need this crazy, I think what Bush called the legal equivalent of outer space. We don't need to have this kind of like exception to the whole rule of law.
Right. I've made this point on the show, but I think it's really important. What they were trying to do at Guantanamo was figure out how to destroy someone's mind, then essentially like put a new one in. I mean, this is, and the making the World War II analogies gets a little tired, but this is like Nazi level stuff where, there they had trained doctors who were figuring out how to make people more sick by experimenting on humans. Here you had trained psychologists who are supposed to, figure out how to repair people's minds, and yet they were literally like experimenting on people, trying to figure out how to destroy their mind. And so it is the most disgusting level of kind of action, and nobody's been held accountable. But Will, we can impeach past presidents apparently. So I don't know. You think they could line up Bush and Cheney and have an impeachment trial or something like that over this? You think that's going to be the new thing?
Let's do it, man. Let's not stop with Trump. Let's keep going. Let's
Right.
impeach every politician, all of them.
Obama's drone strikes, Bush and Cheney for the torture and rendition program, Iraq war. We'll get Colin Powell
Yeah.
for his UN speech.
We'll get Nixon again. Why not? Get LBJ, Wilson. Let's just keep going, man.
Right. We got a ton of them. I'm sure Reagan, there's a pretty good list we could come up with there too for impeachable offenses. Will, anything else you want to talk about on the show today? There's so little information and so few good questions asked by the kind of media that actually has access to the White House. And I know that the ladies constantly like, I'll circle back, and doesn't really answer questions, but at the same time, if you stopped asking all of your stupid questions and writing all of your stupid articles about her saying I'll circle back, then maybe and ask some real questions about foreign policy, we have some answers. But very little it has been asked on details, although I did see, somebody took the time to ask the Pentagon or the State Department spokesman, I think it's John Kirby, what part of the Yemen assistance was going to be cut off and stuff like that. So it's not like there's none, but there's very, very few good questions on foreign policy being asked.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. It kind of like keeps us in the dark a little bit. We don't have access. I can't go into the White House press room and ask Jen Psaki a question. They won't let me within, a mile of the place, especially now, right now, with all the soldiers there. So yeah, I mean, that's a bummer, just to see the first few weeks of the Biden administration has been pretty, they've been pulling punches pretty consistently.
All right. Well, we'll tell people where they could find your work, and then we'll let them know where they could, find and support the show.
Yeah, sure. The best place to find the stuff that I write is probably just checking my Twitter, at the Will Porter. That's I post all the stuff I write up there, and all kinds of other articles and stuff like that. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right. I'm on Twitter at at Kyle Anslone _. The show is at con_interest. Then support the show on Patreon /conflicts of interest, subscribestar/COI. Links to the Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, cryptos are in the show notes page if people want to donate that way. Find the show on Library, Odyssey, anywhere you can listen to podcasts, ratings and reviews if you could give them. Subscribe on YouTube, hit the thumbs up button, hit the notification button. That way YouTube actually tells you when a show's released. They could kill us in the algorithms, but if you hit that notification button, it is supposed to show you every show. So if you do all those things, it will help the show out, and we really appreciate you guys tuning in. PalomaVerdeStore.com, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.